Well, we said we were going to do Cisco Live, but since we're in Central Standard Time, Cisco Live really hasn't started yet. Although I do have some very interesting Cisco Live talks that I wanted to see, and so I'm going to talk about those talks that I want to see right now. So yesterday we talked about how to effectively attend conferences, specifically in the context of Cisco Live. Today we are going to talk about the specific conference talks that I was going to attend or am going to attend at Cisco Live today, and then probably tomorrow we'll do a quick recap of what I want to attend tomorrow as well. Because these haven't gone live yet because I'm in Central Standard Time. Although if you are watching this in Eastern Standard Time, it's noon, right? On March 30th. So 3 talks that I am going to attend at Cisco Live today on March 30th. The first is Cisco Certified Professional Engineers of the Future. Specifically, the reason I want to watch this is with Dewan Lightfoot at Lab Every Day. And so he is a great follow on Twitter. He's got 10,000 followers plus on Twitter. He's a really interesting guy and a great Cisco engineer and a great follow on Twitter. So 1, follow him on Twitter. 2, I follow on Twitter, and I intend to take a look at this Cisco session. The reason that I also like this session is because it highlights engineers, network engineers, and security engineers in the Cisco context, and where they are going and where they came from in their journey. And so I'm always a really big fan of hearing about how people got to where they got to in tech, and specifically in the context of Cisco Live, it's actually pretty awesome, right? I mean, they highlight some of the best engineers, some of the best people in their program. And so the first one would be Engineers of the Future at Cisco Live. Definitely check that one out. I always love to hear about what's going on with engineers and how they got to their point in their career, and I will probably do one of those on my channel at some point too, how I got to this point in my career as well, because it's always a really interesting story. I know that you may have seen, depending upon where you came from to the stream, but the PhD next to my name, although my PhD doesn't necessarily have much to do with network engineering or security engineering, it does have to do with data analysis. So that being said, I always love hearing about other professionals, and I'm excited to hear about some of the other professionals on that stream outside of Dewan, who I've heard his story before, and hopefully I'll get some new insights. The second one is SecureX, Outsmart Emerging Threats with Network Analytics. And this actually goes back to that point that I talked about with the PhD. Securing networks and understanding network analytics is probably my favorite component. The reason is I'm a big network and a big data guy, right? And so the second one is understanding network analytics. And I'd like to see what Cisco's take is and what their newest take is on understanding analytics and data analytics, right? Within the context of securing the network. And so I think that there's a lot that you can do with data analytics. And so there's really 2 components to securing the network and getting the data, right, from a Cisco point of view, right? So 1, I pointed out, was getting the data, right? And 2 is using that data. And so when you start talking and you start breaking these components down, then you have to say, okay, what data am I getting, right? That's the first component. And then you talk about how to use it. So I'd love to hear what their take on analytics is, right? What their take on what data they are compiling is, what their take on how to use that data is. I'll give you an example of how to use data and what I would like to see more of in terms of transparency in terms of how they do their analytics. And that is, how do I define statistical outlier? How do I define how I'm going to notify you, right? And so in the engineering world, we have statistical definitions for outliers, right? We have things like p-tests and n-tests that will allow us to take big data sets and define definitions for outliers, define definitions for sending SNMP traps, for sending alerts, email alerts, text message alerts in the context of advanced Cisco performance metrics, right? So I'm really excited to hear what their analytics discussion is. And I don't know how much depth they'll go into in terms of their definition of outliers and analytics mechanisms, but I'd love to hear what the take is, and hopefully do a little bit of contribution to that discussion as well, because I just like to be able to ask a couple of questions. And then finally, the last one is digitizing industrial spaces. And so I do like the industrial context of networking as well, right? Given my background in chemical engineering. So personally, right, this is just a talk today on what I had planned on looking at, and then I was going to give you a little bit more info about them. But since we're in the Central Standard Time, there's really nothing to have observed yet. But the last one is in understanding industrial components in the context of networking. And so we see more and more and more devices that are useful from an industrial perspective, things like mass flow controllers, temperature and thermoconducting sensors, right? Video sensing and LiDAR and radar sensing and other wireless sensing mechanisms, right, in industrial environments. These are being connected to the network, the data is being utilized. So how do we both secure those infrastructures as well as understand the loads on our systems? And so again, from a chemical engineering perspective, I mean, that's kind of my traditional engineering background. I'm interested in the industrial systems and industrial systems in the context of the networking environment. And I think that, again, as we grow into a more monolithic networking stack, right, with all of our devices communicating over the same fundamental infrastructures, right? We have to be cognizant of all of these things, and so those are my three primary sessions that I wanted to see today. If you took a look at my Twitter post from yesterday evening, I talked about how to effectively attend conferences. I know I talked about it on a live stream yesterday, and I put it up on Twitter as well, but a little bit more thorough discussion on the Twitter thread. And basically, if you'll notice, I mean, I have 3 sessions defined here, then a live stream that I was going to do to talk about it. But I'm not trying to attend 5 in the day, right? I think there's 5 or 6 slots. So I'm not trying to attend all of those slots. I have things to do. I'm here talking to you. I wanted to point out, right, that I'm not overwhelming myself personally with Cisco Live content either, right? I'm picking the most important sessions I want to go to, and then I'm going to those sessions. So that being said, I would encourage you to do the same thing if you are attending sessions. Pick a couple. Don't overwhelm yourself. Take some thorough notes, ask some thorough questions, and then go back through what you learned. That being said, as is always the case, engineer, break stuff, and have fun. And we'll see you tomorrow for another discussion.